I wanted to get on and talk about this paradigm shift that we're in and how life force energy has anything to do with it. So, I'm Stasia Bliss. I teach life force management. That's my specialty, and especially in relationships to each other, to ourselves, to the world. And life force is the force of our life, right? If you've watched any of the other videos or you're familiar with Kundalini, Prana, Chi, all of these things are the force of our life, the force of our aliveness, right? And prior to an awakening, which we are in a global awakening right now, and prior to this, we are in a more constricted state of awareness. You could say we're in a lower dimension. And we can look at the dimensions in relation to the chakras. So if you are familiar with the chakras, first and second chakra, you could say, are first and second dimension. You are very much focused on basic needs and pleasure and family and sex. That is the base stuff. So as we shift dimensions, which we are doing because we are bringing more life force energy into the planet right now. We're doing it consciously, the sun is doing it, and the entire universe is going through this evolutionary process. It's funny how our history says there's this divide between like Darwinism, evolution, and like the creation story. But what's true is they're one and the same. And a lot of the places where there is a divide taught, if we look at how they coexist, we actually see a fuller picture. Because just like the human form goes through a maturation process, like puberty, and we physically evolve in front of our eyes. Like I have a teenage son, I'm like, oh my goodness, he's physically evolving right before my eyes from the child self to a man, and I can see it, I can observe it. And we all remember going through that, if we're not prepubescent watching this. But right now is another sort of maturation that's going on globally. It is a spiritual maturation. It is a human evolution that is like growing up. We are having to grow up from our incubation stage in the cosmos, and how appropriate that Earth's been on lockdown or quarantine, because that's a key word, that's a trigger word for all of our consciousness. That's the word that helps us to remember on some level that Earth's been in quarantine. Planet Earth has been in quarantine for very many millennia, so long. And at other times in Earth's history, we have had contact with other planets and other beings. But Earth has been in a descension cycle, which is part of the cycles, right? Some cycles are ascension and some are descension. And just like the yin and the yang go round and around, we're coming out of the darkness into the light. So it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. So we also need to understand how our bodies change in order to make it into the light, if you will, make it through the ascension, transform into this new reality, because we are dimensionally shifting to a reality that encompasses more light. We're shifting like morphogenically, we're morphing, we're like having different thoughts, we're having different feels, we're having to process things that maybe we thought were already decided, like everything's up for grabs. Like, oh, I thought this is just how a school system is. And as a parent, I also feel like, okay, this is causing deep reflection. What is the origin of the education that is wanting to be shared? Or for any of these paradigms, the medical paradigm, religious paradigms, political paradigms, all of these are based on a particular control system. And that actually mirrors our life force system. So if you think about it, like a person who is just coming through their growth maturation and maybe like had all the chakras closed because, okay, outside world's starting to come in, inside world hasn't been trained, okay? If you don't have a trainer or a guide or someone walking you through, you don't necessarily know like what I need to do to be in these higher dimensions while in this body. So there's a control system in place in our body that's actually our spiritual mechanics, like the physiological part of us, the energetics that is mechanics. Like we have physical parts that are organs and so forth. We also have an energetic system under the hood, so to speak. And that's chakras, that's your spine, that's, you know, the nadis, the meridians that flow and distribute life force. So we're going through an opening of these valves, of these chakras, of these gateways. We're going through an opening where more of life can flow through. More of consciousness can flow through, more awareness, more love, more like an expansion, right? An expansion of what it means to be family. I mean, gosh, look how that one's birthing. We're seeing families that used to be very just always nuclear in the past become these, you know, some call it blended families, but it's very like, it's not always symmetrical. It can be, you know, a bunch on one side and sort of like a flat tire on the other side. And this act of trying to balance, you know, the comings and goings of children or the ins and outs of relationship, it's really like stretching what the meaning of family is. And I sense because really beyond that is the human family, you know, and the galactic family. And so we've utilized these smaller units of family, and they're beautiful, and I love my children and all of that, but we use them to birth the next reality. We use them, like, if we can know how to really love in our nuclear families or in our small pods, whoever we're with, our biggest mission is to bring love into that pod. And then in all of the parts that are connected, bring love into those parts. And sometimes that's tricky to do because there's all the reasons. And so this transformation time that we're in will take, you know, as much time as we need to be able to handle more life force and utilize it in a beneficial way, because all the energetics that have been self-seeking, not that it's fine to caretake your dreams, that's not what I mean, but the inversion that's being corrected right now in the bigger picture is that sort of like needy, greedy, like, you know, Lord of the Rings sort of possessive sucking energy that's being reversed now, and we're getting the, like, it's also a receiving, but it's the energy is shifted. So it's also washing through, and it's changing. It's part of the dimensional shift that we're in. It's part of the dimensional change that we're in, that those parts that were like sucking and literally like vampirical that energy can only sustain for so long, because that's not the natural order of things. The natural order of things is for things to thrive. That's the natural order of things. That's when things are full of life force energy, and life force energy is flowing and it's pumping and it's uninhibited and it's not being siphoned. You know, like if you're a really like great, joyful person, but someone's got like a needle in you and they're like taking your blood out as you're talking, like that's a drain. Like that's a huge drain. So we want to like remove. Reality wants to be like, no, now we're going to move into a different sort of experience where we've had that experience now collectively, and there is a great enough percentage of, first of all, those on planet Earth who know this evolutionary leap is happening, and that's why we're here. We know it's happening despite all the odds. Despite all the odds, we're like, yeah, like dust in the wind, baby. Like that stuff's just dust in the wind with what we got coming. We got coming some incredible times, and just prepare yourself that yes, on the heels of the death of the old comes the beginnings of the new. And how big of a glitch that is, that transition point, that jumping point, that death rebirth process is for you, is going to depend on your management of your life force energy. If you're able to move things through you and process and understand and integrate as quickly as possible, or if there's a real like need to fight and battle it out and like shred things down in the old reality, which may be your part. It may be your part. Because that is also an element of the transformation process. But we are definitely shifting paradigms. We are shifting reality. So what we have said about reality and all the parts will no longer be what we're going to say about reality coming up, which is kind of cool because we're in this like middle zone, and we're kind of assessing like what from the old would we want, or would we change, or would we trash, or are we just hanging on to it because we don't know what else to do? Like, what do we do with this stuff? That's old reality. When we have new reality, like, hey, I'm here and anyone who wants to come, like, of course there's a breaking down of certain structures that need to take place and may lag over for a while, because it takes a while for kind of like the word to get out, the energetic word to go out. Not everything's going to be like on the news telling everyone what to do next. We are needing self-guidance systems, which is also something that when we're attuned with our life force energy, we can feel more clearly where we're being guided, what really is a message, what is something that's a distraction, how to stay on course. And that's a good thing, a good place to be in. If there's anything else. I'm thrilled to be in this transition time. Sometimes it feels very challenging, and yet it's also a great time to rest. I'm not doing all the resting. I was for a good portion of last year, just really letting myself rest until the impetus came to begin to move again. There's a preparation. Now, many are still fighting the sort of ending transition point of the old. And I say ending because everything that's coming after is brand new, and it isn't as the old. And so there is some reframing that will be done. But there's others of us working on the beginning of the new, and it's sometimes quiet and under the surface at first while these two are overlapping. So, wherever you find yourself right now, Just tune into your breathing, especially the channel in the spine. Take a big exhale out the root. One of the most important practices you can have right now is just awareness of your spine and the ability to pump the base of your spine by clenching the perineum and releasing, clenching and releasing, and realizing this is a pump. It's an energetic pump in your body. It's part of your spiritual mechanics. And you have conscious will over it. You have control over it. And it will begin to, like a fountain getting washed out, start clearing up your psychic channel and allowing some free-flowing Kundalini energy that's on planet Earth so much, especially out in the sun. So work with that. Be as much as at peace as you can with the current paradigm shift and wherever you are at with it. Work on acceptance of this moment, wherever you're at with it, that's where you're at with it. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time. See how we get out of here. I don't even know. I don't even know.